Okay, this lesson, we've heard it, we've read it, we know about it, but maybe it's just a good reminder of some things. It's kind of long too. So we're going to look at another biblical character who faced fatigue and discouragement under the pressure of responsibility.
Do you want me to close it up?
Well, I'm thinking that it might help.
Yeah,
Or at least that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one where so heavy burdens, and we're looking at Moses. So kind of a background. What was life like for the Israelites at the time Moses was being born? They were slaves. What had Pharaoh ordered?
No, they had to get their own. What they had to get their own water. They wouldn't give them anything. They had to go.
Yeah, that came a little bit later, but they were multiplying in such fashion that he ordered the death of all the baby boys. All the baby boys. Yeah.
Moses would have been one of them.
Right. And so, yeah, they had to make bricks with straw. They had water. Later on, they had to find their own straw. In the beginning, it was furnished, but later on, they also worked in the fields. Not only did they make bricks, but they worked in Pharaoh's fields. Yeah, so Moses was born, and his mother kept him quiet as long as she could, but most babies start making noises. And so y'all know this story, she made a basket and put pitch on it and put it in the Nile River at the time that Pharaoh's daughter was down at the Nile bathing or whatever. And his older sister was looking out and knew when Pharaoh's daughter found the baby boy, and she wanted to take him home, and she did. And the sister said, well, do you want me to find someone to nurse him and take care of him? Well, she went and got the mother. And all of this is interesting stuff for God's plan, isn't it? So God has an unusual way to prepare us for service, doesn't he? He saved Moses for his special task that we're going to learn about. But let's turn to Exodus 2:11 through 14. What caused Moses to have to leave Pharaoh's house? Well, he was taught by his mother. He knew about his people, the Hebrews. And so in Exodus, it tells us why he had to leave. 2:11 through 14.
Want to read it?
Sure.
One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched it at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Looking this way and that and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. The next day, he went out and saw two Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew? The man said, who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptians? Then Moses was afraid and thought, what I did must have become known.
So he was afraid that it had become known and he would be in great trouble for killing an Egyptian. So he fled. And I don't know where, I'm sure it's somewhere. These stories in Exodus and Numbers kind of bounce back and forth and overlap. And Moses he wrote this, Moses tells the story and then tells it again. And so it can get confusing. But about this time, he was about 40 years old. He was a grown man. So he had to leave because the Hebrew, he felt like he wouldn't be known, and the Hebrews, like telling him, and they weren't happy that he was interfering with their struggle or their disagreement. He wasn't, they weren't happy that he did that. So where did he go and who took him? Who took him in? 15 through 21. I think that's in Exodus 2 also. So just where you left off.
Okay, when Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses. And Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. Now a priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away, but Moses got up and came to their rescue and watered their flock. When the girls returned to their father, he asked them, "Why have you returned so early today?" They answered, "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock." "And where is he?" Reuel asked his daughters. "Why did you leave him? Invite him to have something to eat." Moses agreed to stay with the man who gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage.
All right. So because he helped these 7 daughters of Reuel, who is also known as Jethro, later on they call him Jethro, Moses helped them. He ends up being a shepherd for another 40 years in Midian. So my husband read through these questions. He goes, "Who did the Midianites descend from?" So he had to look it up. You know, he has to know all the details. The Midians were descendants of Abraham and a 3rd wife that he took after Sarah had died. So it was one of his descendants that became the Midianites. So just a little extra information that Tommy looked up. Okay, so God was preparing him in lots of ways, and there's so many things you could talk about here. And so I have some reflect questions. How might God be preparing you for a specific task? Both of y'all can say that God prepared you to be elders' wives. Actually, I can say that too. Tommy was an elder once also. You know, our lives experienced a lot of things and probably helped us in that role as an elder's wife. Teachers of God's word, working in the Blessing Center, all the ways that we serve him. You probably have some more, and you can look back and see how God used some events in your life to help you come to the point of being able to be and serve him that way. So moving on to Exodus 3, not I, that's what Moses was saying. We're going to find out. He didn't want the job that God was going to ask him to do. Sometimes we don't want to take on a responsibility. And I was kind of reluctant to take on the teaching role this time, I will have to say, but there's times when I need a burden, and there's times when I find it kind of joyful. So I know Lynn used to come up here every Friday and prepare for the class you taught on Sunday.
Instead of where it was 2-year-olds, you gotta set the room up where they get there.
Yeah, exactly. So I know you used to do that every Friday. That was a good thing. So what strange way did God get Moses' attention? You all know this story, or this event.
The burning bush.
Yeah, a burning bush that did not burn up. There was fire, but it didn't burn up the bush. And so I really like, let's see, Exodus 3, 4 through 10. That's kind of a lot, but I really like what he talks about in verses 4 and 5. And he says, When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. Then he said, do not come near, take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. And then he goes on to say, I've seen the affliction of my people who have been crying out, who are in Egypt, and I've heard the cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hands of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And then jump down to verse 10, come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. So his specific task was going to be lead the people out of Egypt. And in that job, he became the lawgiver, the judge, civil leader, a spiritual leader, and he was the intermediator between God and the people.
He didn't want to be.
No, he didn't. In fact, he gave some excuses. And that's what the next question is. So 3:11 through 15, can you just scan that and see what he said?
What if they ask me who sent me?
Yeah, who sent you?
Yeah.
What if they ask who sent you? What authority do I have to go to them and for them to listen to me and say, okay, we'll leave Egypt, where they've been for hundreds of years, I think. Maybe somehow 400 years sticks in my mind, but don't quote me on that one. So one of his excuses was, they aren't going to listen to me. What authority do I have?
The God of your father, and they say, what's his name?
Yes. And he says, I am who I am. I am has sent you. That's an interesting way to put it, isn't it? And then later on in chapter 4, he comes up with another excuse. And what was that? In verse 10. Chapter 4, verse 10.
I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I'm slow of speech and tongue.
Yeah. Can't talk very well. Don't put my words together well, whatever that meant. So there was another excuse. But God said, I'm going to give you special powers. I'm going to put the Spirit in you, and you will know what to say. And then later on, he is assigned to Aaron, or he is told to go to Aaron, and Aaron becomes his spokesperson and is, Aaron and the Levites become the priests, of course, later on. So what excuses do we make along the way for doing things?
I don't want to.
I don't. Don't want to. Just don't want to. It's too hard. It's too complicated.
I don't like talking in front of people.
I'm too tired. I don't like talking in front of people. Okay. People might resent me. A lot of times we have in our mind what's going to happen, and we're prejudging what might happen, and we want to avoid what.
Speak to ladies' Bible class. To try to speak in ladies' Bible class. That's to me the scariest thing in the world.
You know what? It is pretty scary. I've done it twice. There's so many people in there that are so well versed and knowledgeable and so much more capable than I ever have been. But I can teach fifth grade math.
I can teach 2-year-olds.
Yeah. And sometimes someone else does need to do it, you know? But if God is putting it in front of you, we need to think about it. You know, we need to think about it. So here's Moses with his excuses, but God doesn't allow him to fall back on those excuses, does he? He tells him he'll be with him. So tackling the task and the plan. And I like this that was in the book. Moses' only assets were his faith, his staff, and his brother. He didn't really have much else, but he was well educated, actually, because he had been educated by his mother about the Hebrews and their laws. Of course, they didn't have laws then because Moses is the one who's going to receive the laws. They were led by the patriarchs then. And he had his faith. What did God call Moses at the end of his life? In Hebrews, he's accredited righteousness. Yeah, he's known for his righteousness. So, was he perfect? No, but he always tried to obey God. So in Exodus 4:27, kind of bouncing back and forth, scan that, and what does he tell? Who becomes Moses' helper? Aaron. We're going to gather, and they gathered all the people. He said, Aaron, God has sent me. You're going to help me. And he gave him signs. Remember, his staff became a serpent, and his hand became leprous when he put it in his cloak, and then it was clean. And so they talked to the people, and the people believed, and they bowed their heads and worshiped. So they had been enduring a lot of suffering and hardship, and they cried out to God, please help us. And now God has sent Moses and Aaron to help them. And how was Pharaoh convinced to let the people go? Took a lot of convincing, didn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know if I could have endured all of those plagues, you know? And every time he said, yes, go. And then he changed his mind and wouldn't let them go until the final plague, which was
In the first one.
yeah, and not even just the family, but their herds and everything, the firstborn. And so at that point, even Pharaoh's firstborn son died, and he said, enough, go away. But even then, he pursued them, and we're not going into all of that. And all the wandering on the wilderness, except that the plagues are what convinced Pharaoh. Now the Israelites are in the wilderness. God has rescued them from Egypt. He destroyed the army that was pursuing them. And they were just in the wilderness.
I'm still like, after everything that happened, Pharaoh still goes after them.
I know.
No,
Didn't make
something's
sense.
gonna happen.
I know.
He should have thought something's gonna happen,
Yeah,
you know?
but who could have imagined a sea opening up? I mean, who could imagine that? God does the most unusual things to rescue us. Even
Yeah.
now, I think we just go, oh, wow, how did that happen? It's the providence of God, you know? It's God working in our lives. We've probably all lived long enough to remember a few of those incidents. So the Israelites, I don't even go into the fact that when Moses was receiving the commandments, Aaron built them a golden calf to worship, and they forgot pretty soon what they were supposed to do, didn't they? And they complained. Something we never do, I'm sure. Oh my goodness. I have to catch myself all the time because I complain this, complain that. Well, what did they complain about?
Food.
Food,
Water.
water.
They said it was better back there
Better back in
than.
Egypt.
Yeah.
How can you say that when you were a slave?
Mhm.
It was better back in Egypt. And I guess they had good food. And they had meat to eat. Remember, they complained about not having meat. This manna, we're tired of this manna. It's the only thing we have.
Mhm.
We're tired of this manna. We want meat. Every time they complained about something, something went wrong too, because he gave them so much quail that it was horrendous. It was like deep and, you know.
Uh-huh. Was that the
It's like,
first
you
time
want
or?
quail? Here you go. I'm giving you
Okay.
quail. Anyway, I have all the scriptures in here, but there's just so much to read that there's no way we can take the time to read all of that. So, okay, so there's complaints. And Moses was like, how would you feel if every time there was a struggle? They also had jealousy, and there was an insurrection, a rebellion by 3 of them that thought, well, why is Moses the leader? We could be the leader. So they were going to rebel against him, and boy, God took care of them, didn't he?
And the whole family.
And the family and everything they owned. Wow, that's horrific, isn't it? But they were not only rebelling against Moses, they were really rebelling against God. That's what makes it so sad to see so many people these days living in rebellion against God. Satan is out there and doing his job. Okay. So Moses became angry and with the people, and he was impatient. So here's where, and let's turn to Numbers 20, verse 8 through 12, and read that. We're skipping through Moses a lot. You know, when he left Egypt, he was 80 years old. He was 40 when he fled from Egypt, and he spent 40 years in Midian. So when he went back to rescue the people, he was 80 years old. And then they wandered 40 years in the wilderness, right?
2 years younger than I am. Because I'm 82.
There you go. And did you lead the people of Israel out of
No.
Egypt? Would you want to lead a stiff-necked, rebellious people? That's crazy, isn't it? Okay, so Numbers 28 through 12. Someone want to read that?
Okay. Let me find it. Okay, take the staff of your brother Aaron. Gather the assembly together. Speak to that rock before their eyes, and it will pour out its water. You will bring water out of the rock for the community, so they and their livestock can drink. Moses took the staff from the Lord's presence, just as he commanded. He and Aaron gathered the assembly together in front of the rock. And Moses said to them, listen, you rebels, must we bring you water out of this rock? Then Moses raised his arm and struck the rock twice with his staff. Water gushed out, and the community and their livestock drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land that I give them.
Wow. That's kind of tough, but Moses was mad at the people. He was tired. He was frustrated. He was angry. He was growing impatient. And out of those, out of that, he ended up striking the rock instead of speaking to the rock. And-
he was just supposed to speak to it, right?
Right, he was just supposed to speak and give the honor to God. And he actually took credit. Must I bring this water from the rock? And he struck it twice. So he took the word's not coming to me. I've had trouble all day with
Credit.
my words. Credit, there you go. He took the credit for the water coming from the rock instead of giving that to God. And because of that, he wasn't allowed to enter into the promised land. Of course, none of the adults during that time were able to enter the promised land. In fact, that's why he made them wander in the wilderness for 40 years until all the adults who left Egypt died in the wilderness. And then it was their children who grew up and were able to enter. So, what happens when we become frustrated? When we have a heavy burden? Sometimes we withdraw and just quit. We've known people who've done that. They're like, this is too much. I'm quitting. I'm not doing it anymore. Sometimes we end up making decisions without God's help, making our own way, thinking that we can take care of it. And we act outside of God's plan, maybe. I think the biggest thing that I see people doing when they're burdened is just giving up and walking away. I don't want to do it. Or maybe doing it half-heartedly. You know, not doing it to the full capacity that you have. And as I said, you know, all of this stuff is things that we know. But we do get frustrated sometimes, especially in the roles that we have in the church, and people disappoint us and complain and make light of situations or don't take things seriously or just inconsiderate. So, any other comments about that? There's more on the back. Y'all probably thought we were through.
Yeah, I was thinking, well, we're already done, we still have time.
Yeah. There's a little bit more. So now Moses is gonna say, this is too much. Just like I said, I think I'll give up. Should I give up? So I want to list the burden that Moses was carrying. There was stuff on the back, right? Oh, that's a different list. You have all the papers. I was like, I don't need it, I have it. First of all, he was leading a large group of people. Do you have any idea how many there were that left Egypt?
Was it 400,000?
It was 600,000 men.
Men.
And it's actually a little over 600,000 men. So there was women and children, flocks, herds. I mean, I can't even imagine the space that 600,000 people take up. Is there a building here in Lubbock that you know the capacity of? I mean, how many can seat in the auditorium? 800? I think it's about 800.
I don't know.
Yeah, 700 or 800. So you think about that, 600,000. Yeah. That's a lot of people.
Mhm.
And God called them stiff-necked and obstinate and stubborn because of all the complaining. And then, of course, they're complaining. We know that. No water, no food, no meat. But you know what God did do? He didn't let the shoes wear out.
Mhm.
He didn't let the clothes wear out. He took care of their health. They didn't really get sick. I always said that when the kids go to college, when I had 3 in college, I wish their shoes and clothes wouldn't wear out for the 4 years they're in college. Wish God would just take care of that.
Mhm.
Seemed like a good deal to me, but
But
anyway.
you know what, our clothes, I mean, unless you keep it for a long time, our clothes doesn't wear out, we just get tired of it.
No, but if you're in the wilderness in the desert
Uh-huh,
and wandering around,
uh-huh.
I have a feeling that,
No, I was talking about the kids. in
oh, the
college.
kids,
The
yeah.
Kids in college.
Oh,
Yeah, but they
well.
get out of
Where-
style.
Yeah, that, we get tired of them, want something newer, but they don't really wear out.
I guess those shoes do more than
Yeah, shoes.
they do, because a lot of them, they had to do quite a bit of walking.
Mhm.
My kids
Yeah.
didn't have cars until their later years at college. Of course, you didn't really use it around campus that much. Anyway. So there were rebellion, there was quarrels, there was jealousy. And then God expected obedience. He expected obedience from Moses, from the people. I think he wanted some thankfulness, don't you?
Mhm.
Some praise and the fact that he heard their cry and led them out of Egypt. Well, what crept in as Moses carried these burdens of the people? Let's turn to Numbers 11. So I told you it goes back and forth. 11, starting in verse 10, I'll read that one. Moses heard the people weeping throughout the clans, everyone at the door of his tent. And the anger of the Lord blazed hotly, and Moses was displeased. Can you imagine that? All the people wailing and crying at the front of their tents. And Moses said to the Lord, "Why have you dealt ill with your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight, that you lay the burden of this people on me? Did I conceive all these people? Did I give the birth that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a nursing child to the land that you swore to give their fathers? Where am I to get meat to give all these people? For they weep before me and say, 'Give us meat that we may eat.' I am not able to carry all this people alone. The burden is too heavy for me. If you will treat me like this, kill me at once. If I find favor in your sight, that I may not see my wretchedness." Well, he's feeling sorry for himself there, isn't he?
Mhm.
But can we understand that? Without a doubt. So what happened, or what crept in as Moses is bearing all these burdens? He's weary, he's stressed, and he's feeling a little self-pity, isn't he? Yeah, he's feeling sorry for himself a little bit. So then it continues, and then the Lord said to Moses, "Gather for me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people, and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting, and let them take their stand there with you. And I will come down and talk with you there, and I will take some of the spirit that is on you and put it on them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with you, so that you may not bear it yourself alone." And saying, that's probably far enough. So God is going to send God, and he's going to help by Moses finding 70 people, and God's going to fill them with the Spirit to help them be able, because what was Moses having to do? He was having to settle quarrels, listen to the complaints, try to figure out what to do, organize, mediate between families. I mean, just think of all the stuff that goes on with people. And so, in fact, in one place, it says that Moses started his day judging people and did it all day long, settling their quarrels and their fusses and their questions. And so it was a big deal. It was a burden. It was hard on him. It did create a lot of stress, and it did cause him to be weary year after year after year after year for 40 years. I'm thinking the number 40 is an important number, because the flood was 40 days and 40 nights. Jesus was he fasted in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. Then they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. I don't know if y'all can think of some other, but I think there are other places where the number 40 is maybe significant or used. And anyway, just interesting to think about. So Moses was overwhelmed, but God sends help. He realizes that this is hard for Moses to be the only one and to be the one that is answering to the people all the time, because people didn't want to talk to God. Y'all remember that? They said, you talk to him and tell us what he wants. We'll do it, but we don't want to see him or talk to him. You know, so he was the one that was always saying, well, God said, this is what you need to do. So what ideals might help lessen our burdens? And I think about, well, Shara, that's a lot to go through, isn't it?
No, but the daughters are there with their help.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. But still, you know. But God is preparing us in our struggles for something that he has, that we'll be facing. And, you know, she's a strong person, so she'll be able to overcome and get better and recover. Anyway. So I think there were some days when Moses was joyful and some days when he thought, when is this day going to end? What else am I going to have to endure? What are the people going to complain about? What problem am I going to have to solve? You know, it was just weary. And we had that with our own families, problems, situations, the church, problems, situations, trying to lead people. It's a hard job. It's a tough job. But God promises to be with us. And that's what these next scriptures are about. Our joy comes when we focus on God and not ourselves. And I think, then I don't know how you could work in the Blessing Center year after year after year, but it brings you joy because you're focusing on doing something for God.
Needs to be done, and
It has its rewards.
it really does. We enjoy it. Get to meet.
And the fellowship that you have with the people is, I mean, you create bonds that are close.
Oh, we've never known Sonny and Josie. We haven't been down there.
Yeah. So our jobs and the tasks that we do bring us joy. Some days may seem overwhelming, a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. And we say, why? And the people may complain and brag.
You mean because we have all the summer clothes in boxes that are piled there in the front of the room, so waiting to be put out, and Mary and I were pulling out all the winter clothes today. We
Yeah.
got piles and piles.
Seems like an overwhelming job, doesn't it?
So if you go down there, be prepared.
Little by little, y'all will get it done.
Those summer boxes are all in the front where your husband put them. We haven't got them hung out.
Yeah, he told me he was gonna do that.
So in Psalm 121, 1 and 2, how much time do we have? Just a few minutes. Help comes from God who created heaven and earth. You know, he was the creator. What can he not do? We can't do anything. He can do anything. Isaiah 41:10 says, "Fear not, I am with you. I will strengthen you and I will help you." Sometimes that's what we need, is strength to keep going. Romans 8:28 says, "The Spirit will help in our weaknesses, and the Spirit will intercede in our prayers." Sometimes I think I don't pray enough. You know, I mean, I pray, but do I really get down and pray? You know? And
Sometimes
ask
I
for
find
God's
that.
guidance. What?
Sometimes find that I'm praying and then I start thinking about something else.
Oh, yeah.
I was praying.
Right, right.
Yeah.
We get distracted very easily. And 2 Timothy 1:14 says, "The Holy Spirit dwells within us." And that's a promise that God gave us as Christians, that the Holy Spirit would be in us. And that has to be comforting. So this paragraph came from the book. I'm kind of getting I'm using a book, but I'm not using a book. Much of this is my own thought process, so y'all probably go, she's got a jumbled thought process. There is great joy and satisfaction in serving God, but we can be robbed of that joy when we make excuses to escape the task God has given us, when we do things our own way rather than the way God wants it done, or when we take on too much and refuse to accept help from others. We allow ourselves to be robbed of joy. So those are some thoughts. And you might think about how you can ask God to help you with burdens, with stresses, with heavy responsibilities. And remember, Moses made a mistake, but God still used him. And I think sometimes we think we don't think enough of ourselves to allow God to use us even when we do something wrong. Moses went on and led the people.
Just a side note, Charlotte and I lives in Lubbock. We were very good friends through the years as her kids grew up and mine grew up. We kind of separated, but very fine person.
Tommy knows them and he grew up with their kids. And Bob Mize used to come by the office. He would bring stuff for the Blessing Center sometimes. And one day he walked in and handed me this book that I'm using, that she wrote. So, yeah. I think they went to Vandalia. Tommy's mother and dad were charter members of Vandalia. And they, so.
I've lost track of them. I guess they're still in town.
They are.
It's kind of sad how you drift away.
I know. Of friendships that were very significant and close. Yeah. Anyway, that's where I'm taking the thoughts from and the ideas from. So God prepares us to make it through our burdens and responsibilities. Y'all have any other